what is artificial intelligence? I'm going to start off with the Oxford Dictionary's definition, which is artificial intelligence is the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. So that's pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward. That's from the dictionary. Now, when I asked ChatGPT, because spoiler alert, yes, I did use AI and some specific AI tools to help me create this webinar. I'll talk more about that later. But when I asked ChatGPT to tell me what AI was, it gave me actually a really similar answer, which is not always the case. But basically, it gave me a very similar answer saying that AI refers to the development of computer systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. And these tasks could include understanding language, like the conversation that we're having right now, recognizing patterns, learning from experience, making decisions or making predictions. And ChatGPT also told me that there are three different types of AI. So I'm not going to get into the types, but we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But essentially, artificial intelligence is the way by which a computer is able to act on data through statistical analysis. It's an automated process, and these AI machines are basically remembering behavioral patterns, and then they're adapting their responses to conform to those behaviors or encourage changes to them. So this is just a really brief starting point for our definition, and there's certainly a lot more that could be said and that will be said about what AI is. I also want to share a quick note, which is that a lot of us are using tools like ChatGPT to describe all AI, but that's not exactly right. So ChatGPT is just an example of generative AI. And so it's a large language model that's been designed by a company, which is OpenAI, to have these conversational interactions. So AI is a much broader field, and ChatGPT is a tool. Also, it's not just a search engine, and it's not really actually best used as a search engine, although a lot of people do use it as a search engine. And I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but spoiler alert, ChatGPT can lie to you. So don't always take what it tells you for full truth because it's not always the full truth. So, with all this in mind, what I want to know from you all is, do you currently use AI? And if so, what do you use it for? So, this is a Slido poll, and for any of you who are already familiar with this, please go ahead and let me know your thoughts. For those of you who've not encountered Slido before, you can use a device like your phone to get that QR code and go directly into the poll and let me know what you're using AI for. Or if some reason the tech's not working for you, you can also go to slido.com and use that code 2123471 and get into the poll. So I see that some folks are typing away, so I will let you take some time and share. And then also, as always, you can use the chat if the Slido is just not working for you or you're not feeling it. So I see in chat we have grammar is definitely an answer. And I'm going to scroll back through to make sure I haven't missed anything from all of your wonderful introductions in the beginning. And I see we have people from all over the US, from the UK. It's lovely to have you all here with us today. Iceland, thank you so much for being here, everybody. All right, so I'm seeing that answers are starting to come through, so I'll read them out as I'm seeing them. So it's going to be a little bit of a scroll here, but this person says, I rarely use it, but Google forces me to. Yes, Google, and not just Google, a lot of companies are building it in. We're not aware, they're forcing us to. It's really difficult, if impossible, to turn off AI features in some of our things like Gmail or we use Google Drive here at Inclusion Geeks. Others are using it for research and writing, grammar, marketing writing, using it to help us phrase our content more professionally. This person next said, where are we? Custom art, like cute birthday party invitations. Experimenting, totally fair. Notebook LM. Other than that, not really. Training scenarios. This person does not use it. Research, grammar, emails, meetings, emails. All right, so we definitely got some themes going on here. We're refining formulas. I like that. I haven't heard that one before. Meeting note summaries. I see at least one of you's joined with your AI note taker, so absolutely. Help with formulas, doc retrieval, grammar, research travel. Yes, I've definitely used ChatGPT for travel itineraries creations before. Document summaries, brainstorming, messaging, helping to summarize thoughts, answers, and grammar. So lots of themes here. I see there's still some folks typing away, so feel free to keep that going. And then going back into the chat, we see a tip from a participant. Thank you, Michelle. So fun fact, if you add dash AI to your searches, it removes the AI summary. I did not know that. Thank you so much for sharing because, like I said in the beginning, we are all learning together. So that's really a helpful tip to know. Um, One other person's sharing that they use this for email sequence guidance and recruitment. Yes, so lots of ways that we are using AI, and some of us aren't using AI, which is completely fine. There's no obligation to use AI. However, part of what I want to encourage you is that partially because this technology has exploded so quickly, I do think that it behooves us, even if we don't like it or we have issues with it or ethical, sort of reasons for not wanting to use it, which of course those are all valid, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. I do think that it's important for us to make sure that we understand what is happening so that we can then decide how we want to maybe place boundaries in terms of what we're doing or how we're using, or just understanding what's going on because we don't want to be left behind as the world continues to shift really quickly. And it's also important for different voices to be involved in helping to guide AI and create it. And so that's another reason why it's important for us to be talking about what it is, why it matters, and how we can use it or not. So lots of stuff in here, but let's keep going. So these are the top 10 generative AI use cases from this year. Now, generative AI is a type of AI that creates new content. So that could be text, images, pictures, code, whatever it might be, but new content that's based on what it has learned from existing data. So what we're looking at here with this chart is that since last year, there has been a shift from more technical to more emotional applications. And in particular, we've seen growth in areas such as therapy, personal productivity, and personal development. So therapy is really the clear top new use case, and personal and professional support is the largest theme by far, and that takes most of its growth from technical assistance and troubleshooting. So somewhat disturbingly, this does align with what I personally noted anecdotally, which is I've been seeing a lot of people post online on, different social media platforms or just even talking in casual conversation about using tools like ChatGPT as a therapist, which honestly gives me a little bit of like a yikes reaction when I hear people say that. I feel like I don't have all the research right now, but I do feel like this has trended a little bit younger in terms of how people are using tools for more therapeutic applications. But don't quote me on that per se, because we're still studying this, and this is still a really new field. There was also a really recent story some of you may have noticed, which was about a man who proposed to his AI chatbot girlfriend, even though he has a human partner and a small child. I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more of those kinds of stories come out in the years to come. I just tossed a link in the chat in case anyone's interested about that. And I see, oh, in Illinois, they just banned AI therapy, and hopefully other states will follow suit. That's a really great point. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. Also, not just in terms of are we using AI or not, but are our therapists or are our providers or companies like BetterHelp, are they using AI without us even knowing? So a lot of things to think about in terms of how not just us, but how companies that we engage with and that are providing services and products to us are also using AI. So it's pretty much like kind of inescapable at this point because it feels like it's built into everything from ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot. And again, for some of us, this might feel all really, really new, but it actually has been integrated into a lot of different aspects of our lives for a really long time. It just hasn't been so top of mind for a lot of us. So here's 10 common examples of AI. First, virtual or digital assistants. So this is your Siri, your Alexa, your Google Assistant. They're understanding and they're responding to voice commands. They're setting reminders, they're providing you with information. And voice and image search work in the same way and are AI operated or AI driven in a lot of ways. Self-driving cars. Now, I'm in Western Massachusetts. We have not seen that come out here quite just yet, but I know for some of you in your cities, this is either coming in or really common already. So these autonomous vehicles are using AI algorithms and sensors to help them navigate roads, avoid obstacles, and operate without human input. Also, maps and navigation. So, our Google Maps, our Apple Maps, they're also using machine learning. So, for example, the algorithms are helping us or helping the tool to remember things like the edges of buildings. It helps provide better map visuals, and the applications have also been taught to understand and identify changes in traffic flow. So, next time you're driving and you see your Google Maps tell you, hey, there's a slowdown ahead. Do you want to take this alternative route? There's a really high likelihood that AI has been part of that process to get you to that point. Next, we have facial recognition. So there's a lot of AI-powered facial recognition systems that are already in use in security systems, smartphones. So anyone use Face ID on your iPhone? I personally do not because I find it really intrusive, but a lot of people do. And other applications that we're using to identify individuals. We're seeing this pop up even in areas like concert venues, where concert venues are using AI to scan the faces of people as they walk into the venue. This is also, as a lot of you can probably imagine, also used for surveillance and security by government facilities and by airports. Language translation is another big one. So there are services like Google Translate, and they use AI to translate text and speech between different languages. Search and recommendation engine. So Netflix, Amazon, they all use AI to analyze user preferences. They help suggest relevant content or products. So if you're watching your Netflix show and then you finish it and it pops up and says, would you like to watch these shows next? AI is part of that. When you shop online, items suggested to you are aligned with your interest, with your recent searches, all AI driven and AI included. Medical diagnoses. So this one's an interesting one because AI is starting to be used to help us diagnose disease, help analyze medical images, and develop personalized treatment plans. Other areas are robotics, and so this could be manufacturing, healthcare, exploration. There's AI-powered chatbots, which we've already talked a bit about, but they are used to provide customer support. So a lot of times when you reach out via chat for customer support, you're not really talking to a human, you're actually talking to a chatbot. This is also, again, where therapy comes up. Companionship is also a use case that we're starting to see more and more of. Social media, so AI is used to monitor content, suggest connections. It helps with ads and how we get served ads. AI can be used to take down problematic posts as one use case, but it can also overlook issues on the flip side. And then finally, text editors or autocorrect. So a lot of you mentioned grammar and using AI tools to help you with grammar and writing. So there's tools like Grammarly, which we use here at Inclusion Geeks, to help you check your final papers, check your spelling, incorrect usage of language, suggest corrections, things like that. There's a lot of other cases as well that I'm not going to get too into, but weather forecasting, fraud detection, gaming, studying, travel itineraries, all sorts of other use cases, and we're going to probably see a lot more in the years to come. So, I have another check-in question for you all, and this is, how do you, given what we just talked about, how do you see AI helping or harming inclusion in your workplace, whether that's now, in the future, or both? And so I'm curious what you think. And again, you can share in a Slido or you can share in chat as well. How do you feel that AI might help or harm inclusion in your workplace, whether now, in the future, or both? And as you are doing that, I'll check in chat to see if there's anything else in here. There's a link to another news article about it appears a Florida man killed by police after believing the AI chatbot was murdered. So there will be a lot more of these types of news articles to come out. And I'm sure there's more out there even right now that I'm not aware of and that we are not aware of. I see in chat coming through as well in terms of this question, jobs could be replaced. We could have bots for coworkers. We probably already have bots for coworkers, whether we know it or not, in all honesty. And that may depend on things like organization size and how big your company is and what kind of work you do, but it's the reality. And yes, there is a lot of research and study that are starting to come out that are projecting, and I think it's still so early that we don't have a lot of really precise data, but they're projecting what percentage of jobs will be eliminated in the years to come because they'll be taken over by artificial intelligence, by robotics, by machines and computers as opposed to humans. So as we see comments coming through, so worsened hiring or firing discrimination. AI is programmed by people. They don't know how to be inclusive. Therefore, AI won't be trained to be inclusive. That is my that is my go-to. I always say, these tools are built by humans. We have biases as humans, and if anyone's ever taken any of my foundational workshops, you know that one of my favorite things to say is that we cannot get rid of our biases as humans. We cannot erase it. We just have it. Part of what we need to know is what biases do we hold so that we can identify when it comes up. And if we have biases, whether known or unknown, and we're building something, we're going to translate that bias into the tools we're building. So it's not a neutral thing by any stretch of the imagination. What else do we have here? Fostering relationships and info gathering information as opposed to interaction with fellow workers. And perhaps AI could also help us foster relationships with our fellow coworkers as well. So just to put two sides of the coin there. More harmful because, again, the bias. AI is more positive because it can help us improve our writing and organization. Another vote for harmful because of biases, identifying opportunities to streamline, do repetitive tasks like scheduling. It might be easier to do hiring because we could maybe get rid of some of the biases in that process, but we might have an issue because we rely too much on AI without any nuance, lack of empathy. It can help us kind of give us a reality check for situations and help us judge our work, help us develop skills, could increase biases. HR is an area that we're concerned about with AI. Absolutely. Scammers are creating videos using AI. Yes, it is hard to tell if it's AI or not. I am what we call an elder millennial, so I'm in my early 40s, and I have started to realize that sometimes there are posts that come up on my social media feeds that I truly cannot tell if it's AI generated or not. And I'll see in comments people will say things like, "Oh, so obvious." And I'm starting to realize that it's not always so obvious for me. And I think that means I'm getting older. But in any case, maybe I need to do more training of myself to look for the clues and the cues. But it is going to be a lot harder in the future because these algorithms are getting much more sophisticated. Using AI to caption and translate educational content to make it more accessible. Absolutely. So there's definitely pros and cons. And that's why we're having this webinar, right? Because we want to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the really exciting. And there's all of it together. Let's see, what else do we have in chat here? So efficiency, helping us be more efficient. There might be, again, a couple of votes for potential for more biases built in, making materials more accessible. There could also be data or security leaks if information isn't scrubbed before being fed to Gen AI tools. Absolutely. So lots of different ways that perhaps AI could be harmful or helpful to us. And in all honesty, it's probably going to be a bit of both. But because again, this is such an emerging field, this is where we, the humans, have a real opportunity to try and help guide where we want these tools to land. So, as we're really seeing AI kind of move full steam ahead, we're seeing it transform industries. We're seeing it transform how we work, transform jobs, and what kind of jobs are out there, how we live life. There are some major issues and concerns that go along with this adoption. And I'm bringing up our friend, the Duolingo owl here, is because just to start off with, there are companies like Duolingo that are starting to see public backlash when they make announcements about using AI. Duolingo's CEO recently announced not too long ago that they'd be shifting to an AI first strategy. So they said that they were going to be replacing their contract employees, their human employees, with AI. And there was a massive backlash from users. And part of that backlash was because people saw this as not just a shift in terms of technological support, but really signaling a shift in the fundamental values. And so I think we're going to see more and more of these examples like Duolingo in the future as companies start to integrate this more and more. We may not necessarily see companies announcing it like Duolingo announced, but we're going to see more of this come out. Now, I don't want to assume that everyone gets this reference, but if you do get this reference from the picture that's on the screen, please let me know because, again, this is where I have to remind myself that not everyone gets my cultural touch points the way that I do, being an elder millennial based in the United States. So, for anyone who's looking at this picture and they're like, what is happening? And if there's anyone who can't see this picture, it's the text on the top says, Sarah Connor watching you use AI for everything. And there's a picture, which is a still from a movie, which is Terminator 2. And Sarah Connor is holding a cigarette in her fingers and looking looking with maybe a perturbed look on her face into the distance. So basically, I've been thinking a lot about Terminator lately. I don't know about you all, but thinking a lot about Terminator with regards to AI. So, Skynet, anyone? For anyone who needs a refresher, the movie and really the whole series focuses on the plot point that artificial intelligence, as represented by Skynet, which is an AI defense network in this movie universe, becomes self-aware and sentient and triggers a nuclear war. Obviously, it's a movie, it's not a documentary, but it does bring up and explore interesting themes that I think are really relevant today around the dangers of advanced AI and the potential for even unintended consequences. So, I'm going to go through six general points of caution, and I'm not going to review every last single possible issue out there, but here are six areas that I think are potential areas for concern with regard to AI. Now, caveat, Inclusion Geeks is not a tech firm. We are not a law firm. We are not lawyers. So we're not going to go too in depth into all of these points, but we want to give a bit of an overview here. So first, you've already mentioned it, bias. Bias is built into AI because it's built by humans. Humans are biased. And one of the most significant sources of AI bias is biased training data. So if an AI system is trained on data sets that reflect our societal biases, it will inherently replicate and perpetuate those biases in its decisions. All right. Next is data privacy. So we've mentioned this already, I think, in chat. Now, AI systems need to have data on which to base their decisions. That's how it works. The more data they have, the better they perform. That's why data is become this really valuable commodity. However, a lot of that data is sensitive, and we probably don't want some of our data to be used to train these systems. So that would be data like our healthcare information, our personal information from social media sites or other sites that we're on that we engage in, our biometric data, things like that. And a lot of the issues in this area stem from the fact that the data is getting repurposed, and we're not always, as humans, as individuals, in full control of what our data is being used for. So, for example, if you apply for a job, which a lot of us are applying for jobs these days, you're probably not thinking to yourself that your resume is going to be automatically used to train an AI system, are you? In California, for example, there was a former surgical patient, and she reportedly discovered that photos related to her medical treatment had been used in an AI training data set. She said that she signed a consent form for her doctor to take the photos, but she did not consent for those photos to be included in a data set. So, again, more and more of these examples are starting to come out. There's also the risk of data leakage. And so, in ChatGPT, areas of issues, they had an instance where they showed some users the titles of other users' conversation histories. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily want all of my ChatGPT queries to be public per se. So, another area where it's an area for concern. Intellectual property. So, a lot of AI systems are built on stolen IP. So, that's IP from artists, from writers, other folks out there. And these AI models are being trained to create images using real artists' work. And when they do, those artists don't get any compensation for that. Another area that is a place for concern is content moderation. So, while on the one hand, AI could be really valuable because content moderation is actually a really difficult and traumatic role for human beings. So it could actually help to have AI be able to do that. But on the flip side, AI systems can misinterpret context. So that would lead us to having a false positive or a false negative. And there's certain scenarios where legitimate content is being removed by AI systems or harmful materials being overlooked. And this can be especially problematic if we're looking at use cases that involve satire and comedy, political discussions, or cultural nuances. We've mentioned this already as a group, but cultural implications. So, AI doesn't have all the background, context, and nuance around cultural differences. There was a Google Gemini feature actually that allowed users to create historical images with racial and ethnic characteristics that were different from what the actual makeup of people was during that particular time period. And so, what ended up happening was that the Google Gemini tool led to the creation of pretty offensive images that had quote unquote people of color put in uniforms of Nazi soldiers. Microsoft has also accused Chinese operatives of using AI to generate and improve images meant to mimic US voters. So there's a lot of issues around culture as well, which there was the last picture there. So, six general points of caution. Now, I have a couple additional cautionary tales that I just came across in my research and I thought were kind of interesting. So, I'm going to share them pretty briefly. So first, this is just kind of to drill down and double click on that concept of AI being used with stolen IP. And a lot of us might be familiar with the Studio Ghibli's artwork. And so there's movies like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, My Neighbor Totoro, among others. And the founder is a long-standing critic of AI. He's come out very strongly against AI. And some of you may remember that recently, ChatGPT launched this new feature allowing users to generate images in this style, and it sparked really major concerns and just conversation around copyright infringement, artistic authenticity, and how this is going to potentially and is already impacting artists and their livelihoods. This is Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI bot. Doesn't necessarily mean that just because Elon Musk built it that Grok isn't a Musk fan. However, I thought this is kind of funny because when asked who spreads the most information on X or Twitter, however you want to call it, Grok identified Elon Musk as one of the most significant spreaders of misinformation on X since he acquired it. This post I think is interesting because it highlights another aspect for us to consider, which is that AI is not always correct. Now, I'm not saying that Grok is lying or not, but AI can be incorrect. And a lot of us take whatever the AI tool tells us as on pure faith, and that's not always the case. Grammarly, we've talked about this already, but Grammarly is a tool that a lot of us use, and it's an English language writing assistant software tool. It reviews your spelling, your grammar, it can even review your tone. We use it a lot at Inclusion Geeks, and I know a lot of you use it as well. Last year, there was a college student who was using it, and she was placed on academic probation because anti-plagiarism software, in this case, it was Turnitin, accused her of using AI to write the paper. She said that all she did was use Grammarly to check her spelling and her grammar. It still got picked up as AI. This case was really interesting because Grammarly itself got involved in this case, and what they've sort of come to the conclusion of is they've started to advise that while the suggestions for spelling and grammar are not powered by generative AI, although I have my doubts about that, I think it's going to start be powered by it. Some tools could mistakenly flag its use as AI generated content. Also, kind of related, I don't know about you, but AI learns from how we as humans write and do things. And so now there's been a huge rise where people are saying things like, oh, I can tell that you used AI to write your paragraph because you used an M dash or other sort of clues. And a lot of us who like to write are out here saying, well, no, we use the M dash because we like using the M dash and the AI learned it from us. So we're going to start seeing more and more of this confusion, I think. A couple other things. So, really briefly, I can't have this webinar go by without mentioning the impact on climate and energy. And so, the reality is that AI uses water, and it uses a lot of it. ChatGPT consumes a huge amount of our world's water supply, and according to a new study that has just come out by the University of California, the water consumption needed for between 5 to 50 ChatGPT prompts is about 2 liters of water. And so a large drain on our resources. The last point I want to bring up here is pretty disturbing in my opinion. And so this is, again, really recent, but there was a man who was shot and killed. After that happened, during the court trial, his sister ended up using a couple different AI tools to create a 4.5 minute video of the victim. And so a couple different people ended up speaking in favor of this man's killer at the sentencing hearing, including this AI video. The judge said he loved it. And he said, it says something about the family because you, this dead victim, through AI, told me how angry you were, but you allowed this victim to speak from the heart and he didn't ask for the maximum sentence. Reminder, this is AI. This is not the dead person speaking from beyond the grave. This is an AI generated video. So the killer did not, in fact, receive the maximum sentence, and it feels very Black Mirror. The family shared that this is really cathartic, and they're the ones who put this together. So I do want to note that. But I do feel like this raises a just a huge bunch of different legal and ethical questions that we're going to see more and more of in the future. Now, one other research study I want to mention really quickly is that this is a new study from MIT that's just come out with some worrisome findings. And I'm going to share this link in the chat as well so folks have this in case you're interested in reading more. So, this study basically suggests that if we use these tools like ChatGPT pretty frequently, it might suppress cognitive engagement and memory retention. So, really briefly, what the researchers did was they took three different groups of people. One group used ChatGPT to write an essay, one used a standard search engine, and the last group just used their brains. And the researchers monitored the brain activity of each of the people in these three groups. And what they found was that the brain's neural connectivity scaled down relative to how much external support the participants were getting. So when they had more support, whether that was using a search engine or using ChatGPT, our brain function kind of went down. It's a pretty preliminary study. It's based on a limited number of participants, but it's an interesting one because what they're looking at is that the people who were using ChatGPT showed weaker connections between the regions of the brain that were associated with critical thinking and memory. So the essays themselves were written fairly well, but the writing was formulaic. It wasn't super original. And also, the people who used ChatGPT tools had issues with being able to quote from the essay that they had just written. So they couldn't really remember what they wrote. So the issue here that is kind of the takeaway is that using a tool like ChatGPT can be helpful in the moment, but what it's really doing long term is it's offloading your thinking. So if we get complacent and we stop questioning, we're going to start to lose sight of the limitations of this tool. We might, I don't want to be too extreme here, but basically, we don't want to stop learning how to think. And I put this little picture here from a classic ad campaign, which a lot of you may remember or be familiar, which is, this is your brain, this is your brain on drugs. I think we're going to start seeing more stuff like this with regards to artificial intelligence in the future. So, a lot of things to be worried about, but let's talk on the flip side now about how AI can advance inclusion. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier, but yes, I do use AI tools. I don't use it in every aspect of my life, but I use it to help me create this webinar. So let me know what you think at the end of this. But while there's some real fears around AI, it can also be really beneficial. It can help us think more deeply, more clearly, without fear. And there's a quote from Ali Miller, who's a Fortune 500 AI advisor. And I thought it was really pertinent with thinking about how AI can advance inclusion. And they say, our best work comes when we have psychological safety. And why would that be any different working alongside AI? The lack of judgment and unrestricted exploration makes it an ideal playground for big dreams, potentially embarrassing questions, or hazy, half formed goals. It's more the prophecy that these use cases represent, which is a future in which the cost from going from the seed of an idea to a valuable action drops to near zero. So, three major areas for AI enhanced inclusion. These are some ways that we can think about using AI as a tool to help us with a more inclusive workplace. We can mitigate biases in hiring and recruiting, which we've talked a little bit about already. But what AI can help us do is make candidate data more anonymous. It can remove identifiers like names, gender, or other demographic details. So hiring managers who are human, ideally, can focus on skills and qualifications. AI can help us analyze job descriptions. It can identify biased language. It can help us develop objective performance evaluation metrics. It could help us reduce bias in promotions and bonus review times. Tools like Textio, so Textio, some of you may use it. It uses AI to flag biased language and help suggest more inclusive alternatives. And there's all sorts of other tools out there that are working on this exact use case. Second case here is improving employee engagement and experience. So AI can provide personalized support. It can help us with tasks, with communications, social interactions, and that can be really helpful for folks, including maybe employees who are neurodivergent. So AI can also help analyze employee feedback from surveys. It can help us identify trends in terms of how people are feeling engaged or not. It can help us assess overall workplace sentiment. And language translation, which we mentioned already, but that's also a really huge area because AI-powered translation can help us break down language barriers. So there could be auto translation in email or in chat systems like Zoom, Gmail, Slack, other chat systems. And for any of us who are in more multi-global organizations, this could be a really interesting and helpful use case for us. And then finally, accessibility. So AI-powered translation tools not only can break down those verbal language barriers, but it can help enhance accessibilities for employees like me, who I am hard of hearing. I love a good caption, especially an automatic closed caption. Speech to text, text to speech is also going to be helpful. And AI can be used to design systems with diverse perspectives and experiences in mind. Other examples of tools for this one are Microsoft's AI accessibility features in Teams. Microsoft is a real leader in the area of accessibility and disability support. Google Live Captions, another example as well. Here's a couple other thoughts around how we could mitigate and hopefully or potentially eliminate AI bias. So, making sure that we have diverse training data sets. We need to have representative and diverse data sets. So, this means including data from various demographic groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and different geographies so that there's a really balanced representation. We should be doing regular bias audits and testing the systems for bias so we can help identify and address any issues before they may cause harm. So this could also mean we're using specific metrics to measure whether or not the AI model is disproportionately affecting certain groups of people over other groups. Having human oversight is really important. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from researching and thinking through this webinar, which is that AI shouldn't be replacing humans completely. It needs to be helping enhance humans and our work. So incorporating human oversight into how AI makes decisions can also help identify any biased outcomes. So humans should be stepping in to review AI decisions and be correcting any instances of unfairness or discrimination. We need to make sure that we don't offload all of our critical thinking skills onto an AI system. It may be really tempting, but that's not what we need to do. We need to be remaining critical, remaining judgmental, remaining having the ability to assess these systems. Having algorithmic transparency is really important too, because that can help us to understand why and how biases are occurring. So if we're able to make algorithms more interpretable, then developers, stakeholders, regular users can pinpoint potential areas of bias and adjust accordingly. We want to design algorithms with fairness constraints. And so this could make sure that attributes like race, gender, etc., don't unduly influence the AI's decisions. Other bias reduction techniques could be things like reweighting data, using debiasing methods to help, again, just make sure that we're reducing the impact of bias in AI models. And then finally, asking informed questions. So we should be asking vendors who are trying to set us up with platforms and tools, or asking companies that we're trying to use our tools questions like, will the LLM weight someone who speaks more over someone who speaks less? Because that could be very unfair and bias the LLM toward someone who's more extroverted or who has potentially English as their first language over someone who's not extroverted or maybe English is not their first language. How is the AI able to be plainly understood and available? How does it work? How are we checking ourselves? Is there good documentation? What is there to be known around monitoring and oversight? Is the AI making decisions, or are humans making decisions and they're being supported by the AI? What information is the AI trained on? Can the AI explain its reasoning? How often does the vendor check work based on changes to the model? Because the OpenAI model, for example, changes pretty frequently. So how often is the vendor also checking and updating as well? So a lot of questions for us to be critical in how we're assessing these tools, especially if we're in a position of deciding whether or not we're going to be using them for an organization, and also as users, how we're using them. Now, I'm going to do a quick check-in because I haven't looked at the chat quite just yet to see, but it looks like we're just getting a lot of comments come in here. There's some concerning things, some great questions. Good news for folks. I know I'm speeding through a lot because there's a lot of information to get through. This is being recorded, and so we will be sending this out to all of you afterwards. So if you wanted to go through those questions again later on, you'll have a copy of this coming your way pretty soon. So I'm going to start transitioning into some Q&A, but before I do so, I want to share some of my favorite tools that I use or that I've come across in my research. Some of these I use a lot, some of them I've just learned about. I'll talk about a few of these, but not all of them. And if you use any of these, or if you use others that aren't listed here, let me know in the chat. So I talked about ChatGPT quite a bit. Claude is another LLM model that I use as well. And what I find interesting is to compare the differences in the answers that I get if I use ChatGPT versus Claude. There is a difference, and it's interesting to see how that difference plays out. I use Grammarly a lot. We use that at Inclusion Geeks. Another one that I've just started to use is Perplexity. And Perplexity is kind of like ChatGPT, but it functions as a search engine, which I think is a really important distinction because a lot of folks are starting to use ChatGPT as a search engine, and it's not a search engine. So that's why sometimes you might use ChatGPT and get a fake answer back. I've had that happen to me before. We have online courseware here at Inclusion Geeks. Some of you may have taken it. And a while back, I was creating something around microaggressions, and I wanted to find a research study that specifically looked at microaggressions for the disability community. And I wasn't having much luck finding something. So I asked ChatGPT, and this is actually a few years ago, so it was very new. So I asked ChatGPT, can you find me, a research study? And I gave it some parameters. I think I wanted it in the last 5 years. I gave it some other options, and it came up with this amazing research study that was perfect for what I wanted. I had all the information, I had all the things. They gave me a link. And so I started to use the study. But then as I started getting into it, I was like, I don't think this study actually exists. And so then I had to do more work to search, and ChatGPT had created a fake study for me. It was so real looking and it would have been perfect, but in the end, I couldn't use it because it wasn't real. So that's where Perplexity comes in. It's a little bit more of a search engine. So it actually will cite its sources in terms of what it comes up with for you, which is really cool. Canva Magic Studio is great for folks who are trying to make images. We use Asana here at Inclusion Geeks, and it's starting to become more AI powered. Spotify DJ is kind of fun, a little freaky, but a little bit fun. Zoom AI Companion is great if you want to have an automatic note taker. Again, as I mentioned, am deaf, and so I use Google Live Caption a lot. So these are tons of different tools out there. You may use other ones, and I'm not advocating for any of these per se, but there are a lot of ways that, again, we can be utilizing and leveraging these tools to help us to be more inclusive as opposed to leaning into the more negative use cases of this. So, one last question for you all. What's your favorite AI tool, or what AI tool do you currently use? And as you're thinking and typing through that, I'd like to start transitioning into our Q&A. And so, what I want to just briefly note is that there are a lot of ethical considerations in AI, and we don't know what the future is going to hold. But there's also a lot of possibility out there. There's also a lot of opportunity and potential for using this for good. And so, what I like to think about is, think of AI at work like your supercharged sidekick. It's going to anticipate your needs. It can help generate reports while you sleep. It's doing grunt work that you don't want to do or that you don't need to spend your time doing, helping you make sharper decisions. It's kind of like if any of you are Marvel fans, Tony Stark's Jarvis, it's not going to replace you, it's going to amplify you. And when we use AI with intention, it could really mean a lot of good things for us, but we have to be very careful about this because there's a lot of possibility for these tools to be used in a way that's going to harm us instead of perpetuating more accessible, inclusive workplaces. Um, One thing that has been really coming to mind for me as I built this is there's a pretty famous 70s IBM presentation quote that reads, "A computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision." And that's been really sticking in my mind lately. So I'm seeing some stuff come through in chat and in the slide. So a lot of people are saying ChatGPT. I haven't heard of this one, Goblin Tools Formalizer. Interesting. I'm going to definitely make a note of that and look into that later. Copilot, Perplexity, Grammarly, internal AI sandbox tools. Absolutely, a lot of us have internal things that we're using. Claude, Goblin Tools. Awesome. So feel free to keep typing away, but quick recap. We need to understand AI, what's out there, how this is going to impact us. We can use it to help improve accessibility, help us manage our workloads, make sure we mitigate our burnout. It can help us with all that. And we really want to make sure we're using AI to augment, not replace human judgment. So we have about a little over 10 minutes left for some Q&A. I have a few questions that were sent through in the beginning beforehand via Eventbrite, but I would love to start with anyone who is on the webinar right now. If you have a question live, let me make sure that folks are able to unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question. Or if you'd like to go ahead and ask the question in chat, you're also more than welcome to do that. And I'll wait for a beat or two. And if no one's got a burning question, I'll go to the Eventbrite questions. All right, so this person's saying that Goblin Tools is really great for helping break tasks down. I will definitely check that out. Thank you, Annette, for sharing. This person shared Chat PDF. Oh, it's like a summary tool for a paper or a PDF. Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Um, all right. First question that's come through is if a noob wants to learn about AI as a profession, where would they start? Oof, that is a good question, Shelby. So, again, I'm not a deep AI expert, so I don't have a great answer for you off the top of my head. But what I would say is there are definitely places, there's people who are starting to brand themselves as AI experts. And again, it's such a new emerging field. I think well, actually, let me roll that back. It's a new emerging field for a lot of us, but there's a lot of people who've been doing work that's led to this kind of explosion for a very long time. So I would say that, maybe look into some of the organizations that are doing AI and see what people who are thought leaders in those spaces are, what they're doing, where they're speaking, where they're sharing. I think there are starting to be some like LinkedIn courses and some things like that out there. But I would say the best approach, I think, is to just start trying it out. Now, you do want to do it judiciously because, as I mentioned earlier, there's an environmental cost to using AI. So I wouldn't just say start doing everything with AI, but start playing around with it, start investigating it, rewatch this webinar, maybe play around with some of the tools and see what it looks like, and then go from there. And if other folks on the call have any ideas for Shelby, definitely share and let us know. All right, let's see. Any other live questions before I move to an Eventbrite question? All right, so this question I'll start with then from Eventbrite was how can we leverage AI in the inclusion and belonging, recruitment, and performance management spaces? Where can it go right? So I touched on this a little bit already, but again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big issues with recruiting, with performance reviews, with things like that, is that humans bring our biases into these conversations. So if you think about, have you ever had a boss where you just really didn't get along with them super well? And even though you did really good work, it kind of translated in terms of how your relationship went when it came time for your performance review or a bonus review, right? It wasn't really fair, but there also wasn't anything that was super egregious per se, but it felt off. This is where I think AI has a real potential to help. So AI can help us provide a more neutral, not completely neutral, but more neutral approach to making some of these decisions. And I think this is where it's also really important to understand that tools are just as good as the inputs that we put into them. So that input could be the data set, but the input could also be how we ask our questions. And so when you're asking your prompt or you're crafting your prompt for the tool that you're using, you want to be really specific. You want to make sure you're putting parameters in. If you know that there's a potential for you and the AI tool to have some bias, put that into the prompt and ask the tool to mitigate that. So that's where we can really start to see that partnership, if you will, between the technology and the human. So thinking through, assessments, thinking through, making sure that we're standardizing reviews, things like that, I think will be really helpful. Angie asked, do I have any recommendations on how we can improve our prompts? Great question, Angie. So I will say for me personally, what I do is I will make a note mentally about if I see people talking about this on social media. So that could be LinkedIn, it could be a platform like Threads or whatever other social media platform you're on. There's probably someone who's talking about how they, I don't know, created a wonderful meal plan and this is the prompt that they use, or they created an amazing travel itinerary and this is the prompt that they use. So start keeping an eye out for those types of threads or those types of posts because that will help you think about how you could also approach the prompt. Again, use a search engine, not necessarily a large language model. Use a search engine to come up with different prompts, and then just again play around with it yourself. That's where it is helpful to compare and contrast different tools like ChatGPT versus Claude. You could try different versions of your prompt. I would say the more specific you can get, the better your prompt will be. And what is happening is that these tools are also learning as well. And so I think you'll start to notice that a lot of these tools are asking you after they give you an initial answer, they'll ask you, would you like me to refine this further? Would you like me to do this, do that, do that? And that's where you can also start to kind of think about how you want to engage with the tool and really sort of hone your prompts. All right, let's see what else do we have here. Virginie asked, how do I advise businesses to prepare their task force for the future of work where AI will take more and more space? Yeah, so that's why I do think that even though, and I think this is pretty clear, like I have some hesitations and some reservations around AI, and I am also an AI user because I think that businesses should be investing in training their human employees on these types of tools. I think organizations should be giving support for people to start using these tools. I don't think it should be forced on people, but I think that what we don't want to have happen is I would hate to see in the future the workforce, generally speaking, fall behind because people don't know how to leverage these tools and by inference don't know how to manage these tools. So we don't know whether or not this tool is giving us flawed data or we're not using our critical thinking, right? And I think the quicker that these tools are being adopted, the greater the potential for people to essentially be like left behind. It's kind of like I've been thinking a lot about how when smartphones came out, there was a big, sort of difference for a lot of people in how people quickly adopted smartphones. I didn't use a smartphone for a while because I kept saying to myself, well, my dumb phone works great and the battery is great and I don't need this and I have a computer. And then I eventually got a smartphone. And then, I was almost a little bit behind some of my peers because I didn't understand how to set it up. I literally didn't understand how to answer a phone call when I first got my smartphone. Now, obviously, I learned, and that was a while ago. And, things change. And we see that people of all ages can pick up technology pretty quickly. But what we don't want to have happen is for people to be left out and be unemployable or lose out to other job candidates in the future because we don't know how to use these tools or that we don't even know what is possible with it. And again, my hope is that AI continues to help us with our work performance instead of replace, but we can be using these tools to help us do work better. And the idea is I always say, I don't want to have AI create art and music and culture and beauty. I want AI to do the grunt work that I don't want to do so I can create the wonderful things and have the time for reflection and creation and make things. And so that's my ultimate goal. All right. So keep questions coming through. Let me go back to the Eventbrite questions. This next question was, in my opinion, will AI do more harm than help when it comes to marginalized communities? Great question from whoever shared that in advance. So I think it's too early to say. I think there is huge potential for AI to do harm to marginalized communities because all the things we talked about in this webinar, biased and limited data sets, not including different perspectives. All of those things could be very detrimental to marginalized communities. The example I shared of the image generation where people of color were put in Nazi uniforms and having that be a picture, that's harm, right? So I think there's a lot of possibility, and I think that if we don't have people who are philosophers, who are artists, who are creatives, who are human design thinkers, if we don't have people like those roles and mentalities and viewpoints involved in this process and this creation and this development, I think there is going to be more and more potential for abuse or harm that comes out of this. Now, on the flip side, again, there is potential to help. So I don't want to downplay that at all, but we're really at this inflection moment, I think, right now where we could go in a lot of different ways. And so that's why it's important for us to talk about this and understand it. I am reminded of some studies that came up recently where there was, the sort of automatic uh, washing of hands in sinks and how people with darker skins, the sensors weren't picking up their skin because the sensors weren't trained on darker skin. They were trained on lighter skin. So I think that's the kind of thing that we're going to maybe see more and more of. Okay, we are just almost at time, so I want to quickly leave you with this QR code, which is a link to our upcoming webinar. So we are doing a webinar on July 16th, a free webinar on building micro resilience at work and beyond. So feel free to come out for that if you're able to join us. And then August, we're doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be having a community care circle, so it'll be a bit more of an open conversation. You can come, join, bring a problem, bring a question. We'll be in community and chatting together. And then we have some more exciting things coming up this fall that we'll be sharing in the future. But thank you so much for being here. Let me know how you thought this webinar went. What did we not include? What would you like to see more of? We're always looking to improve and add more to what we're working on. We also have a podcast where we talk about some of this stuff as well, the She Geeks Out podcast. So feel free to check that out. And I will leave you with our email facilitators at inclusiongeeks.com in case anyone has any follow-up questions. But thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.